So in part one of our two-part video here on the first orchestration, we talked about how to create the orchestration and make it update this item. So when that was finished, these two fields got updated with the version from the get version web service. Now we're going to talk about how to troubleshoot that if things didn't work out so well. So let's go back over to Composer for just a second. And let's intentionally break this transition. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into the authority section here, and we're just going to add some bogus username password. Okay, so now let's deploy this, and I'll come back in a second when it's deployed. Okay, so that's finished deploying. Now we've intentionally broke the transition item web service, and we'll demonstrate that by clicking and submit on a new item. So this will be item 2, and if we hit OK, we will sit here, and usually the description and custom field would fill in after a couple seconds of you hit refresh and it would fill in. Well, that didn't happen, so now we need to start troubleshooting. So the first thing you would do is go back into Composer, and on the Home tab there's an option here called Common Log Viewer. So if you check the Common Log Viewer and you come down here where it says Common Log Viewer, click on Overview, and here's your orchestration. With the Common Log Viewer checked, you can right click on your orchestration and click on Debug Logging. So by default, just when that ran, you can see that there's an error. I mean, this red X basically shows us the error, but before we get to that, let's look at a couple things first. When you click the Set Filter button, two important, well, this whole screen is kind of important, but the one thing you want to make sure is if you have multiple environments, make sure you're looking at the common log from the correct environment. So some people have a production and a stage. Just make sure you're looking at the same environment that you just ran the orchestration on. And the filter, well, the time frame is pretty self-explanatory. This one, if you're trying to troubleshoot all technical problems, it's best to have this second one checked, or it just gives you a little bit more information. So let's hit OK. And let's actually go through another submit here. So let's submit. This will be item 3. Okay, and we're going to let that go. And if we go back over to Composer to do our troubleshooting, we can click on refresh here. And it takes a couple tries, but if you hit refresh, you'll notice that these numbers will go up. So we're still looking at that very first run. And it takes a second. Okay, so here we go. So now we've got, we notice we have 6 and 5. And what these mean are, these are errors. Like 5 is the number of errors that happened total, and 6 is the number of non-errors. And then there's warnings and information. So what you want to do is drill into this a little bit now and click on View Log. So these are the run times down here, and you can auto select the latest run. So if we're looking at the latest run, that's the one we just did a second ago. The easiest thing to do is, if you want, you can just start with the first one, say show message, and this is everything that's going on while the orchestration is running. And if you want, you can study these more, but if you click the next button, you can see that we're drilling down through the steps. And so if we keep hitting next, so here's the get version that ran, and here's the response from get version. And if we keep going down, we get to what will look like our first error. So our first error is actually this one in red, but this is the service step right before it, and you can see it says invalid username or password. And if you keep going down, you can tell that this is the response back, or that's the actual fault. So anyway, the point is, this is the first step in troubleshooting, is to turn on this logging. And another helpful thing to do is when you get to this point, if you need to get help from support, or just need to see this in a different way, you can make your run go here and then click this export button. If you export this run, what it'll do is actually create a file for it, an XML file, and if you send that to support along with your case that you create, this is a good way to get this type of information out. So other than that, it's really hard to look at the common log, but you'll notice that it should create these 3 files. If it only creates 1 file, just send us the 1 file and we can use it. But if you just then open this file, open it with Internet Explorer, I think it looks just as good in Internet Explorer or Chrome, I can't remember. We'll look here. Let's see how it looks. Takes a second. Okay, so this is basically all those steps, and at the bottom you can see the error, and then it has all of the content in it. So it's a good way to send us the output from your common log if you can't figure out what is the problem. This will sometimes help out a lot. So that kind of wraps up this part of the tutorial, but the one thing you want to do when you're done troubleshooting the common log is to go back to overview and just take debugging back off. What that does is keeps the log from getting too big, because this is logging all the steps in the orchestration for every item that ever gets submitted. So while that's on, your log could grow, depending on how busy your system is, fairly rapidly. And you can just turn off the common log viewer altogether if you don't want to see it in Composer anymore. And yeah, you would at that point just go in and fix the problem that you discovered with your logging and redeploy, and hopefully your orchestration works out. So that's it. Hopefully this has helped, and we'll talk to you later.